We are now simulcasting the last 3 hours of this Tuesday, second day of February 2010 edition at prisonplanet.tv. Thank you so much, radio listeners and TV viewers, for tuning in today. For the next hour, we are joined by Mike-Rivero of whatreallyhappened.com, an excellent analysis and news site. We always enjoy having him on with us once a month. I want to go over internet censorship openly being announced, openly being pushed, and declared by Italy, Australia, New Zealand, England. Cybersecurity czar resigning, saying it's a Pentagon takeover. South Australia government gags internet debate about political candidates now not allowed. That's the news of Australia, mainstream media. I mean, this is getting insane. I want to talk about Obama's new giant tax program. I want to get into the banks calling for a global regulatory body to punish the banks, just like the Federal Reserve was supposed to punish the banks when it really gave them power. They want world government one way or the other. We're going to be breaking it all down today and taking your phone calls with Mike Rivero. Mike, good to have you here with us.
Thank you for having me on the show today.
There is so much going on. I just threw out a few of the issues and topics I want to get your take on. What do you think is most important? You've got missile cruisers and weapons being moved in, openly talking about hitting Iran. What do you think is most important right now?
Well, I think we're definitely seeing a renewed push for a new war in Iran, and it seems like the government of the United States, either goaded by Israel or simply because they can't think of anything else to do, they're going to try and get out of the mess they're in by starting a war and hoping that the American people will simply follow the flag off the edge of the cliff with the government. Unfortunately, we have a lot of history in this nation where the government repeatedly gets itself into some extreme financial situations, then sees war as their best way out. And it has worked in the past with World War I and World War II. I don't see it working now, but I think the U.S. government has basically run out of any other ideas that they can try right now. They're broke, they're in debt. Even if they nationalized every private asset of every American citizen, that would only cover about 1/4 of the hole they've dug themselves into.
And meanwhile, their health care plan's failing. Their swine flu hoax is failing. Their global carbon tax is failing. But they're not stopping. Obama just says, I'm going to use executive orders and do it regardless.
Yeah, and that's a very, very dangerous situation because he's making it clear that the government has broken away from the will of the people or even the best interests of the people. And I was talking with somebody earlier today that it looks like they're going to go ahead with the attack on Iran, and they no longer care if we know it's legit or not. Even as we're finding the British Parliament is agreeing that, yes, there was no legal basis for the attack on Iraq. Blair is already out there saying we've got to go into Iran. The problem with that approach is that if you go back to your Art of War by Sun Tzu, victory always goes to the army that believes they have the moral right on their side. And if the United States starts yet another war with an army that knows they're the bad guys, that they're the invaders and conquerors, and they're not fighting for anything that is morally right, they're going in with a tremendous disadvantage that our wonder weapons is not going to be able to overcome.
Well, that brings me to the next point when we come back in the long segment. Clearly, the underwear bomber was a staged event. It's now admitted in mainstream news, but buried in the articles that, okay, the State Department ordered them to let him on the plane, and he didn't have a passport, but we helped him. Obviously meaning the smart-dressed man was a government agent. Who else can get somebody on board a plane and pass the security checkpoints and the naked body scanners? And this is clearly a kickoff for the new police state. We're seeing all these new fake bin Laden tapes. They're going to need to stage a new terror attack, a new 9/11, to go into Iran, I believe. Or politically worldwide, it would be too damaging for even the arrogant, hubris-filled globalists. So I want to get your take on that, Mike Rivero, on the other side. Then we'll get into the economy, internet censorship. The global tyranny takeover is moving into a high-gear phase. I'm Alex Jones with Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. Thank you for joining us today. You can always listen to the free podcast if you don't have an AM and FM in your area or shortwave radio or satellite. You go to Infowars.com, click on the radio page, the top right-hand corner, all the different podcasts, all the different flycast, different ways to listen how you want, when you want, where you want. We also archive for PrisonPlanet.tv members a higher quality a commercial-free podcast at prisonplanet.tv, and the video each day when we simulcast the radio show at prisonplanet.tv. Mike-Rivero joins us from whatreallyhappened.com, an excellent alternative news source and aggregator. I go there every day to make sure I'm not missing anything. And again, Mike-Rivero joins us for stations that just tuned in. Some don't carry that first 5-minute segment. Recap the geopolitical state of the global empire that's basically used America up now. It wants to use us finally to go into Iran, then fully bankrupt us after we funded China and Europe's rise. There's no way they're going to be able to attack Iran, which they're clearly gearing up to do, and moving weapon systems and more ships and missiles in, and new sanctions. They clearly can't do that without a staged terror attack. And then we have the underwear bombing situation, where it's now come out that the U.S. government ordered him to be allowed on the plane. That's in the Detroit News. That's in other mainstream newspapers. But buried in the article, like it's no big deal, that, okay, there was a second guy on the plane. He did supposedly have a bomb. We did lie about Kurt Haskell and say that he wasn't telling the truth. Yes, he has other witnesses. Yes, the State Department ordered him to be allowed on the plane. Then one of their people let him on the plane. This is huge information. So start with the state of the empire. Mike, I want your take on this. What the empire needs. Do you agree with me that they need a staged terror attack, and the underwear bomber was the kickoff, the new fake, which they even admit they can't even prove are real, bin Laden tapes coming out right as the Yemen operation starts? I mean, this really looks bad, Mike.
It looks bad. There's one moment of levity in the whole situation, and that, of course, was the bin Laden tape in which he's critical of global warming, which I think was pushing a little bit too far to be believable, and a lot of people actually got a chuckle out of that. But you're absolutely right. They need a false flag. They need something that is so big and horrific. It's going to shock Americans into supporting whatever the government wants to do. It's got to be so big that it shocks Americans into unquestioning obedience without even thinking. The crotch bomber was not it. They didn't get any traction with it. Symbolic gestures, almost, maybe. That's not going to work. They need something really horrifically big, and there are two targets of opportunity coming up in the next couple of weeks. The first, of course, is the Olympics up in Canada, and we already know there's something like 2 tons of explosive that went missing from a company that is partly owned by the Carlyle Group. Now the company is trying to say that, oh, the explosives aren't missing, it was just a clerical error, but the police are saying they can't validate that the explosives have been accounted for. So that situation is in play, and of course we have the Super Bowl coming up.
Kind of like those missing cruise missiles with Cheney, and then at least 11 members of the base being murdered to cover it up.
Yeah, the missing nuclear weapons. I mean, the whole credibility of the Iran war is going to be based on proving to America that Iran really did have nuclear weapons after all, not only to recover from the IAEA reports and the National Intelligence Estimate, but also from the lie in Iraq. And so the possibility of our government or Israel setting off a small nuclear weapon someplace in the United States or Canada cannot be discounted completely. And I know it sounds fantastical and like it's from a James Bond movie, but we know that 9/11, that cover-up is beginning to fall apart. We've got world leaders saying it needs an objective outside investigation. More and more of the rest of the world's governments are seeing this. It was a false flag attack to kick off a new war.
But isn't it even bigger than that? Clearly the U.S. has been positioned worldwide as the new boogeyman.
Yes.
Rupert Murdoch-owned papers worldwide bash us. Then domestically, he poses as a conservative to control the libertarian movement. Clearly, America does the dirty work, and then we're imploded, and we're now beginning to come to that point.
I agree with you. We're the new Nazi power, and it's amazing how closely our government is following Adolf Hitler's playbook, both from the false flag attack in New York, which matches the operation in Gleiwitz, to the selection of an ethnic minority to be used as a scapegoat and a social target. It's the same propaganda tricks over and over again, and it's going to end the same way. Look at how Germany ended World War II. That is the future of America, unless the American people are willing to grab their government by the lapels and say, we're not following you.
Well, that's the good news, and I want you to really walk through this. I mean, chronicle all the hoaxes, the flu, the WMDs, the banker bailout, just on every front, the carbon tax, the healthcare takeover. Everything they're doing is failing, And you talk about the government ignoring the people. The executive and the bureaucracy is even ignoring their own Congress. I mean, this is rogue government.
It absolutely is. And a big part of the problem is that our top leaders are so insulated from the rest of the world by all these yes men and yes women that cluster around them. I don't think they understand the extent to which ordinary Americans understand. We have been lied to on a monumental scale.